Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we are back with another video in my amateur radio series. As many of you know, I got my technician license here in the US about 2 or 3 months ago. My call sign is KC1RGS. I have been learning a lot about this area of technology that I have not explored before, and I'm taking you along in that journey, and I've got a lot more to learn. So I reached out to the folks at the National Association for Amateur Radio, otherwise known as the ARRL, and they're located not that far from me. They're only about an hour up the road here in Connecticut. So they invited us up for a tour, and we got so much stuff on this tour that it's going to take 2 videos to show it all to you. So in this video, we're going to get a tour of Whiskey 1 Alpha Whiskey, which is the station located at ARRL headquarters. And then in the following video, we're going to get me on the air for a little bit and then take a look at the past, present, and future of amateur radio. But first, let's get that tour underway, and we'll cut to me at the ARRL headquarters. All right, I'm joined now by Steve Goodgame.
Lon, good
you
to
are
meet you.
the new Director of Education and Outreach here at the ARRL, is that right?
I am. I'm the Education and Learning Manager.
So we picked the right guy to talk to.
You picked the right guy. If you want to get educated, I'm the guy.
So tell us about W1AW. What is the significance of this station? This is kind of sacred ground, I think, for amateur radio.
This
right?
is kind of sacred ground. In fact, people travel from around the world to get on the air here at W1AW. It's the kind of the flagship station, and you'll see that when we go inside. We take a lot of pride in the station itself. You get on the air with the W1AW call sign, and people just, the pileup is crazy. So around the world, people know that this is kind of the center of amateur radio activity, and you want that contact, I guess. It is, because, you know, ARRL we are the National Association for Amateur Radio, and while we're the National Association here in America, people around the world recognize that we are also the world's largest organization for amateur radio. So everybody wants to work us on the air. Now, people think about radio as a very short-range kind of technology when you look at how far your cell phone can go from the tower. But we've got antennas all over the place that we're going to look at after we go in and transmit a little bit. But it's possible from this station, without anything in between, to reach people how far away from here? From this station here, we can operate anywhere in the world and out of this world. And I guess for people that are setting up their own amateur radio station, they could probably get the same range out of what you could get here if you have the right antenna? With the right antenna and the right equipment. I mean, now, this is by far an advanced station, but it doesn't take this kind of setup to be able to work around the world at all. You can do it, as the saying goes, with 100 watts in a wire, you can do a lot of the same things. All right, so we're going to go in right now, and who are we going to see inside? So inside we're going to meet Joe Karsha. Joe is the station manager, and he's going to give you the nitty-gritty on everything here, and if we twist his arm just right, I bet we can get you on the air. All right, let's do it. Let's do it. Joe, I presume?
Yes, it is.
Pleasure to meet you.
Same here.
So you are in charge of this ultimate ham shack, I guess we could say,
yes,
right?
I am. I'm the station's manager and its trustee.
So why don't we start over here at this station,
Sure.
and we'll kind of work our way through. I see some racks and I see some other things. So
Yes, we do.
what goes on over here?
Well, W1AW's primary mission is the transmission of Morse code and digital and voice transmissions worldwide for any licensed or even non-licensed amateur radio operator or shortwave listener to go on the air and just copy our transmissions. And that is all done from here using this equipment.
And you transmit, we want to make it clear that you transmit and not broadcast a bulletin every couple of hours out of this station?
Generally it starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We are transmitting Morse code practice for the benefit of anyone who wants to learn Morse code. But we also have digital transmissions. By digital, I mean audio digital. We use what is called RTTY, radio teletype, BPSK 31, which is a phase shift keying, and MFSK 16, which is a multi-phase shift keying, and those are specific types of digital modes.
And who can pick up this bulletin? How far away can it go?
We received reports as far south, if you will, as New Zealand, and as far east and west as either Asia or Africa. Pretty much around the world.
So it's international.
It's international,
right out of here in
yes,
Connecticut.
right out of here, correct.
Now over here, I see a very familiar piece of software, and Jake can come around here and show everybody. This is FL Digi. This is something I think everybody uses, right? It's this is what the bulletin comes out on.
Most amateur radio operators who are heavily involved in digital communications, but also CW, would use FL Digi.
And CW, by the way, is Morse code, right?
Correct, yes.
And so, see, this software can generate the Morse code, and it can also...
This software, correct, can generate the Morse code for us. We just supply the text for it. It'll also generate all the 3 digital modes that we use, again, using the text that we provided.
And so if you picked up a bulletin from the ARRL, it came from this computer right here.
From that computer there,
Right.
over to the racks.
Okay, so now on the racks here, I'm looking at a bunch of essentially off-the-shelf radios that any amateur operator could install in their home.
Correct. This equipment is directly available right off the shelf. This is nothing special about it. We are transmitting on 9 amateur frequencies from 160 meters or 1.8 megahertz.
So the audio out of that computer goes in, gets
It
split
goes
out.
into here. It is distributed equally among all the
And
different
then
transmitters.
each of these radios is tuned to a different frequency.
Correct.
then
Within the amateur spectrum, and these are frequencies that we use. Obviously, no one owns a frequency, but these are frequencies we just happen to use for our transmissions.
And people know to listen on those frequencies.
Correct,
for
because
that
we
bulletin.
have to publish our schedule.
I see. And so now we're going to take a look at the antennas outside in a few minutes. And,
Okay.
and you were working on them today, so you
I was actually working on today, so
you're dressed for
hence
the
the
occasion.
dress, so yes.
But you're still official. You got your ARRL.
I got the ARRL, correct.
So we're going to check out the antennas in a few minutes because the antennas are unique to each frequency also.
Correct, yes.
So we'll look at how all that comes together. What else do you want to show us?
We'll actually show you the operating positions for visitors. Now, even though the ARRL is a membership organization, the use and visiting of W1AW is open to any licensed amateur radio operator or shortwave listener radio operator. So I have 3 studios where visiting hams can come in and operate the station. Now there are 3 classes of license. There's a technician, general, and extra.
Yep.
Okay, and you have certain privileges associated with each license class. Well, depending upon your license class, you can come in here and operate on those bands and modes granted by your license class. So we have 2 operating positions in each one, and that allows pretty much all activity, Morse code, phone, digital, from 160 meters down to 10 meters. And we have similar stations in all 3 of these studios.
And if I'm a technician, can I broadcast, or sorry, broadcast,
No
but
broadcasting.
can I transmit on a frequency that I'm not licensed to transmit on?
Only if you have a control operator with you. In
Somebody
other
who
words,
has
someone
that.
who has a higher class of license.
Okay.
Now, we cannot be control operators for legal reasons,
Okay.
FCC rule reasons.
Yep.
However, if you came in here with someone that held either a general or an extra, or even an advanced, advanced class licenses still exist, you can get on the air and operate on those bands granted by that particular license class. You would still use just W1AW, but you can operate on other bands higher than your current class of license with a control operator. That control operator must be present with you at all times just to ensure that you are operating in accordance with FCC rules.
Right, and those are very important to follow because...
Correct, yes, because W1AW, this is the station in honor of our Hiram Percy Maxim, our founder and first president. We are just under more scrutiny than anyone else. This is a station known worldwide. So we do what we can to ensure that we are abiding by the FCC rules.
Let's take a look here in Studio 3 because
Let's take a
there's
look at
some
Studio 3.
digital stuff going on in here. And
Exactly.
We'll
Now,
have Jake follow
here,
us in. So this is, now we're going to do a video on FT8 in the near future, but this is kind of the most popular thing right now in ham radio, right?
Correct. FT8, yes. FT8 is one of the most popular modes right now. FT8 is a purely digital mode, and you can probably hear right
Yeah,
now.
I can turn it up so you can hear a little bit more. Yeah. It's kind of eerie sounding.
It is
isn't
weird because you're hearing within a specific slice of frequency, of audio frequency. Let me just turn up a little bit more. You're hearing multiple transmissions occurring simultaneously, but at slightly different audio frequencies. That's why there's this cacophony of noises.
Right.
The program here, which we're using, which is WSJTX, is used to essentially decode those signals and send and receive them.
And we're getting stuff from Israel, Belgium, Poland, Denmark, Spain, Kaliningrad, Germany, France,
Asiatic Turkey,
Yeah.
yes.
And that's not unusual.
For this particular mode, no. The selling point of this mode is that since it is DSP based, and obviously it also depends upon your computer, because it is sound card based, we're able to receive signals below the noise level, as opposed to some modes like phone or voice communications, where it's very difficult to hear below the noise.
The
But
human
this
has to be able to hear above the noise to hear it, but here the computer can pick the signal out of the noise.
Below the noise,
Below the noise,
correct.
okay.
And that is pretty specific because if you're operating in an area where you have a slightly elevated noise level and you have a difficult time running Morse code or phone, FT8 or a digital mode, and we have to be a little specific about that, a digital mode would work better for you than, say, running CW or phone. And we're actually doing that right now. We're listening to 17 meters or 18 megahertz, and we are just sitting there listening. We are decoding all the stations that are currently active right now.
All right, so Joe, now we're in Studio 2, and I guess each studio can kind of do the same thing. Like if I wanted to make contacts, I could do that from any one of these studios.
Correct. It could be in any one of these. They all have HF and to some extent VHF communications. But there's also specialty.
And the specialty here is?
In specialty number Studio 2 is satellite tracking. Now we're using a program called SAT-PC32 that allows us to control a Yaesu elevation azimuth rotator.
And what that basically is so when I was a kid, my father would say, hey, I want to change the TV channel, rotate the antenna.
Correct.
I had this thing in the closet we had to turn so the antenna on the and that's kind of how this works. It tracks the
yes, except it's all done automatically for us and by computer.
And I think and what's important to point out right now is that as a satellite, or in this case you're tracking the space station,
correct,
as it goes overhead, you have to keep your antenna kind of tuned on the satellite or the space station, right?
Correct, because if we were going to be operating through the International Space Station, I need to have a bead right on it. And the only way to do that is to run a program like SAT-PC32. And I'm saying like because there are a couple of other flavors of different programs out there, but we use SAT-PC32. But this program, because once it's controlling the rotator, and since it knows where, in this case, the ISS is located with respect to our position, the antennas are pointed right at it for the entire length of the pass. And since the space station is traveling at about 17,000 miles an hour, that pass may only be 7 to 9 minutes long, depending upon how high or low it is in the, based upon our horizon.
And when it's overhead, what can I do?
There are two things you can do right now through the ISS, and it depends upon what they may be doing. You can either run a regular FM digipeat, where you are communicating through an FM repeater in the sky, and they're always running their APRS, their automatic position reporting system. So you can either connect with that or just kind of beacon your position.
So I can talk to people through the space station, because I did that with my handheld radio, right?
Correct, if the repeater is active. Now sometimes they have a revolving schedule. Sometimes if there is an unscheduled EVA, all amateur radio communications are shut down.
Right, just for safety.
Correct, yes. So it really depends. The best we can offer for if you want to find out is to always check like the AMSAT SAT status webpage, because it tells you generally at that time what a particular satellite, including the ISS, may be doing at the time.
And what's nice is that for amateurs who are just getting started with a technician license like mine, this is a way you can really extend your reach over a VHF or a UHF connection, because you're communicating through a satellite orbiting. And then, then it's repeating that signal and extending it further out.
Correct. Now you see that circle there. The plus represents the International Space Station. That's its footprint. So when you consider when that's overhead, that little plus there is our location. That is the coverage of the International Space Station. The space station is only about 250 miles up, but it has a very wide footprint. So if they happen to have the FM repeater active at the time, there is no reason why I cannot work other hams who may also be tracking the ISS and active on that repeater.
Interesting. And so that's right. So if right now somebody in Australia can maybe hit somebody
within when you're looking at the
circle.
Philippines and all the other areas there, they're going to be hitting into, well, that pass might take them near New Zealand. And that's assuming that there are hams ready to operate, say, FM repeater work.
Depends on the time of day and all that kind of stuff.
Correct, exactly, yes.
How many satellites are up there, roughly, that amateurs can
Roughly, there's about 35 to 40 satellites that amateur radio operators can use. A number of them will allow you for voice or Morse code communications. Others are strictly digital satellites. The digital is for telemetry, but also for experimentation as well.
So you can send little data packets up and listen to them with software like FLDigi or some other piece of software.
Yes, or APRS. There were some APRS satellites out there as well, which essentially will digipeat other positions.
Just packets of data going back and forth.
Back and forth, yes.
And now I see here, we didn't talk about this in the other room, but you have a
Morse code paddles. The Morse code paddles here, every operating position has a set. Those allow my visiting operators to run Morse code.
And you just push the paddle together? Is that how it works?
Yes. It's
I see,
either side generates a dash or a dot. So no more, although you can still use it, you use what's called a straight key.
Okay, so
to
you just
generate the dash and dots. You just touch it. Let's see. And you can set the speed. And this system keys the Morse code keying part of the transceiver.
And you no longer need to have any proficiency in Morse code to be an amateur. That was changed a while back.
That was changed some years ago, yes. They dropped the Morse code requirement. They found that other countries would also drop the Morse code requirement, saw no change in their licensing. And they realized that while Morse code is still a vital component of amateur radio, you don't necessarily need that as some form of stumbling block or need to get into amateur radio, so they dropped the requirement. And that doesn't mean you can't run Morse code, you can still run it. There are still many events that take place both on weekends and during the week that use Morse code. So it is still a very popular mode.
All right, so Joe, now we're outside.
Beautiful. We're outside, beautiful day, wonderful day in the summer.
Beautiful day. You're looking cool with your, yeah, you look great. So, so this antenna matrix here, I guess, what's the right word for this?
This is actually, well, this is our 120-foot tower. It's a Roan tower, and this tower houses most of the antennas we use for all of our scheduled transmissions. The wires you see running up the side, that is half-inch hardline. These are used because they will run high power, and also in terms of attenuation, how well signals are attenuated. These actually have very good attenuation numbers. So we use hardline primarily to run up the side of the tower to connect to all the different antennas.
And each antenna is what you use to transmit on different frequencies?
Correct. Each antenna is specific to a frequency.
And that's determined by its length?
Technically, yes, by its length, because you have an electrical length as opposed to, say, a physical or RF length. Now let's take, for example, this lowest antenna here. This is for 20 meters or 14 megahertz.
That's one of the more popular bands these days.
We call it the bread and butter band.
The bread and butter band.
Because that band is generally active throughout the day and generally regardless of time of year. If you were to do some calculations, that element there, for example, would be specific to that frequency of 14 megahertz. And it's the same for all the other different antennas. And since they're specific to one frequency, when we're dumping power into these antennas, it's most efficient on that frequency. So that's why, because we use these for all of our scheduled transmissions, we use what are called monoband antennas.
Okay, so that monoband meaning it is designed just for that band.
One band, correct.
And so if you want to add another band, you need another radio and another antenna and kind of stack it up from there.
Correct, yes. Now on this one, we are running multiple antennas for, in this case, for all of our scheduled transmissions from everything from 40 meters or 7 megahertz down to 10 meters or 28 megahertz.
All right, so now we're at a different tower that looks very different than the one we just looked at.
Yes.
And so I guess depending on the frequency that you're on, your antennas are going to look differently too, right? So,
correct, yes.
So what do we have up on this tower?
On this tower, this is a 60-foot Roan SSV, and this houses primarily a lot of VHF and UHF antennas. Up there, as we mentioned earlier, we have satellite tracking. Those are the antennas that we're actually controlling. We have antennas for 2 meters or 144 megahertz up to 2.4 gigahertz. 2.4 gigahertz is obviously receive only. And we use those primarily for all of our satellite communications. The other antennas coming down are for experimentation. We also have different stations running within the studios, but also in the station itself. And those allow us access to different frequencies as well. Now, we'd mentioned earlier a little bit about single band antennas, single frequency antennas. Well, for someone who may be starting out, they may not have that ability to put up something like a 5-element 20 meter.
Yeah, my wife has put the kibosh on that.
Yes, yeah. So what you want to do is work on a multi-band antenna. And you may not be able to see it, but if you're looking along the side of the tower here, along the leg, you see what we call essentially ladder line, because it looks like a ladder. That is a simple doublet antenna. And it consists of the ladder line, which acts as a feed point, kind of like coax. And there are 2 long lengths of wires, which are non-resonant on any particular frequency. With the use of a tuner, preferably an automatic tuner, I can use this antenna to get on multiple frequencies. So I don't need these big antennas, these big poundages of aluminum sitting up on a tower. I can put up something as simple as that and get on multiple amateur frequencies.
So basically with a piece, some wire and
some wire, some ladder line, and a tuner.
And a tuner which gets it to work on each frequency.
Correct.
You're good to go. Because that's one of the things from my initial video when I bought all my ham stuff. Everyone said you're missing the tuner.
You're missing the tuner.
Now
yes.
Some radios have a tuner built in, right?
Correct. And those tuners that are built in are more or less just to kind of clean it up a little bit.
Okay.
For example, if you're running on 80 meters and you have a dipole for 80 meters, it's cut for 3.5 megahertz. it will be a little difficult to use that way at the top of the band, at around 3990. The tuner kind of helps up with that difference. In some radios, the tuner may also allow you to use that antenna on a completely different frequency. But really, if you are doing something like this doublet, where you want to run on multiple frequencies, you really do need an external tuner. And I would recommend a high-powered automatic tuner because it makes life easier.
Right, it just does it on the fly as you go.
It does it on the fly. Most of the new tuners today, which are automatic, also remember the settings. So if you're, say, operating on 3.5 megahertz or 80 meters, and you decide, I want to go to 15 meters or 21 megahertz, the tuner will remember the settings and tune it for you.
So Joe, I noticed as we were walking back in here, there's a lot of historical equipment that is in here. Some of it's still working, is that right?
Some of it is still working, yes. This here in the foyer of W1AW is where we have some of the historical pieces related directly to ARRL, kind of the beginning, but also for W1AW.
We have old Betsy here.
Old Betsy here. Now, old Betsy is Hiram Percy Maxim's rotary spark gap transmitter.
She looks kind of dangerous.
It is, actually. You can cut meat with that thing.
Really?
It's spinning, yes. Back in the day, I guess I can use that terminology.
Yeah.
Back in the day, prior to audio generation of Morse code and so forth, if anyone, radio operator, commercial, shipboard, whatever, wanted to generate or transmit Morse code over the air, they had to generate a spark or an arc. That was the only way to do it back then. And the only way to generate the spark or the arc was to generate a high voltage, a very high voltage. As I often say, I use it as an example, is when you're listening to a radio during a lightning storm, and you happen to see that lightning flash and you hear that crackle in the radio, it is the same type of physics. A lightning strike, a discharge of high voltage, generates noise up and down the entire RF spectrum. All hams did and all radio operators did was figure out a way to kind of tune that particular set of noise into any one particular frequency. They were using Morse code technology behind it, and therefore your arc had all the characteristics of a Morse code transmission.
This is essentially a home-built radio.
This is a home-built radio.
This is homebrew when it was really homebrew.
When it was really homebrew.
Yeah.
Now, Hiram Percy Maxim was a mechanical engineer by education, so building something like this was very matter-of-fact for him.
So back in those days, everybody just kind of figured it out, and they all had their own solution. Yes. And I guess if you were a mechanical engineer, the solution was more mechanical than
than it was electrical.
Right. And this still works.
This still works. Old Betsy still works.
And we're not turning her on because I was told that she generates quite a static electrical field that might impair my equipment.
Yes. Despite how foolproof we think this equipment is, at the end of the day, it's the simpler things that take them out.
Right.
This transmitter here generates a very large electrostatic field. That electrostatic field can adversely affect electronics. In some cases, it'll just temporarily disable the equipment. In some rare cases, it actually damages it. You've probably heard ESD, electrostatic discharge. That's a big thing, especially now because of today's electronics. We got to wear our bracelets
when we take our computers apart.
Yes.
Right. This thing just spews it out in the air.
Spews a lot of electrostatic energy, which will take out very sensitive electronics.
Right. So for its time, there was not a lot of risk in using it. But now, with everything so small and integrated, that it can blow it up.
When you think of just how small surface-mounted devices are, how teeny tiny they are, and we rely on them for everything, and just how massive an electrostatic field for something like this is generated, and the currents that it induces, the voltages that it induces, it could be something as simple as this that takes out electronics.
Wow, pretty neat. Well, there's a lot more that we can see here, but we have limited time. We still have a lot more to see. But I really appreciate Joe taking us on a tour of this facility. I know this is your baby. You're in charge of this,
baby.
right?
I'm in charge of W1AW, yes. She's my station.
And you told me earlier that you started this interest in radio as a kid, just walking in and knocking on the door, right?
Pretty much, yes. My interest in radio actually started when I was very young. At a time when there was a lot of AM reception, the cool time, when there was a lot of music, my parents actually encouraged my love of radio. And then from there, it just kind of grew.
Very cool. It sounds like a dream job.
It is, yes, it is.
And you've got a lot of stuff to maintain here, so we don't want to keep you any longer, but thanks for taking us on a tour today.
You're most welcome.
Now, in the next video, you're going to see a lot more of Steve, who we met at the beginning of the video. He's going to walk me through making some contacts over the air, and then we're going to look at the past, present, and future of amateur radio. So stay tuned. There is a lot more to come on this two-parter, so set your notifications and we'll be back with another episode in this series next week. That's going to do it for now. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Chris Allegretta, Brian Parker, Hot Sauce and Video Games, Baby Metal Fox God, Tom Albrecht, Amda Brown, Matt Zagaya, and Tech Time with Eric. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.